So my purchase of this buy-to-let property in Hull was hands down my most unpleasant, most unbearable property purchase that I've ever undertaken. Actually, no, that's a lie. It was the one in Liverpool that actually fell through, but that technically wasn't a purchase, it fell through. So this was a very close second in terms of experience, but in terms of a purchase, this was really something that I would not like to repeat again. Let me give you some context. So the seller, and this is really going to be the crux of why this whole process went the way it did. The seller was selling the property in Hull, the buy-to-let property that I was buying, but they'd already purchased another property. They were moving house, essentially. So they had already purchased a new property and were paying a mortgage on that one. And they were selling the property that I was buying and still paying a mortgage on that one too. So they were paying two mortgages. And don't forget, you know, last year, we were in the midst of the whole cost of living crisis. Interest rates were going through the roof. The cost of energy, the cost of food, the cost of doing anything really had done that basically. So our pockets were being attacked, yeah, by the economy. And in the midst of it, you got someone paying two mortgages. So as you can imagine, and I would be too if I'm, you know, going to be honest, I would want to get that property off of my hands and into the buyer's hand as soon as possible. I would want the buyer, if I was in the seller's position, to be moving ASAP. You know, I don't want to be paying two mortgages for any amount of time, okay? And I told you that the transaction took 6 months. So they were paying two mortgages for 6 months. But, you know, to be honest with you guys, that was the timescale that solicitors, property conveyancers were working to during that period. I did my own research on it and, you know, that was about the average. I bought several other properties and if I averaged it out, those took round about 4 months end to end. So this was longer, but not massively longer, okay? But saying all that, you know, the seller was unreasonable, guys. 2 months in, just 2 months in, they already were starting with their nonsense, okay? So they started writing to the agent. So just to give you the background, you probably know this already, but in case you don't, when a property is being sold, you have the buyer, in this case me, you have the seller, you have the agent, the estate agent, who's a person that the seller has paid to list, market, and sell the property. Then you have solicitors. So I've got my solicitors, they've got their solicitors, and those solicitors are supposed to talk to each other throughout the transaction, throughout the process. In theory, I'm supposed to have nothing to do with it apart from here and there if the solicitor needs anything from me, and the seller's not supposed to have anything to do with it. But 2 months in, guys, you already had the seller writing to the agent saying, this is taking too long. It's taking too long. What's happening? I need updates. I need updates on how long the sale is going to take. And they're already, you know, really early on putting pressure on the agent. And the agent is being paid by the seller. So they need to basically do their job. Do what they're told, really. So they started writing to me. The agent started getting in contact with me 2 months into the process, like, oh, how's it going? I was like, I don't have any updates for you. You're an estate agent. Tell me the last time you sold a property in 2 months. Oh, wait, it doesn't happen. It never happens that way. Even with cash purchases, it never happens that way. So it was 2 months in, so I was pretty gracious. I was like, even though I was a bit weird, I was like, oh yeah, it's fine. So, you know, the conveyancer, my solicitors are going through the process. They're waiting on the valuation to be done, which will confirm the mortgage offer. In the meantime, they're doing their searches, so their title searches, their environmental searches, all of that good stuff. I was like, everything is on track. It's fine. I'll let you know when I have a more meaningful update. A couple of weeks later, the seller's just got in contact again. Are there any updates? No real updates further to the one that I sent you 2 weeks ago. The title searches are still going on. Still waiting on the valuation to be done. I think it's just completed. I'll let you know when there is a more meaningful update. Now, between 3 and 4 months in, the seller started to get more aggressive with the agent, and the agent was obviously relaying those messages to me. So then I started to hear stuff along the lines of, oh, it's taking a bit long. Is there an issue? with the purchase of this property. No issue. Properties don't get sold in 3 months, maybe 4 months. You know, that's about the average, but you know, it could take longer. I know that there's a backlog on the desks of solicitors at the moment. And then I started saying to the agent, as the agent, you know all this already, you know better than I do. So, you know, have a word with the seller and manage them a bit better. But don't really have the capacity to be given updates to you every other week. So they started asking actually for updates on a weekly basis from me. And in error, you know, in my naivete, I agreed to doing that. I wanted to be nice. I really wanted to facilitate the process. Like, I want to buy the property, you want to sell it. We're both on the same page. Let's work together. Let's both be patient. Let's go through the process. There's no issues. But, you know, I wanted it to be all amicable. So I was okay with doing that to begin with. But it just carried on. And, you know, got to the point where, you know, 2-3 weeks in a row, there was no update. That's just how solicitors work when it comes to selling and buying properties. Sometimes there is no update for a few weeks. And I know it can be frustrating. You know, I've bought several houses now. When I include my own one and the one that didn't go through, I think I've done this like 5-6 times now, right? But there's no special treatment. Nobody's special, okay, in this process. Everybody has to go through the process. And by the way, the whole process is for my protection and their protection as well. I think that's a key thing, right? Solicitors have got to do their job and do their work and take the time that they need to ensure that it's a legit transaction, that I'm buying a property that legally the seller has a right to sell. It's not no dodgy transaction. It's not a money laundering thing. And it's protecting the seller to ensure that I'm buying it in a legitimate way, that I'm not, you know, using the proceeds of criminal funds and further down the line the property gets repossessed and the transaction gets voided. All of that, it needs to be done, right? So then we got to like 4 months-ish, four plus months, and then I started getting like some quite, you know, arsey messages via the estate agent from the seller. Look, this is taking too long. We're gonna have to start talking about pulling out of the transaction now, okay? I'm like, what are you insane? 4 months in, we're literally towards the end of the process. I said it took 6 months, so you know, it was 8 weeks away at that point, and I'm getting messages saying we're going to start looking at potentially pulling out of the transaction. And I was like, okay, what do I do here? Because it put me, you know, at the time I was like, oh, they might actually do this, because they've been doing this since 2 months into the transaction, and they've just been relentless, right? And I got on the phone to the estate agent, and I had to have like a real firm but, you know, cordial conversation. I was like, look, you know, and I know that transactions, property purchases, sales, the average is about 4 months. You know and I know, because I'm sure you have a portfolio of many other properties that your company are dealing with that are being sold and purchased at this moment in time. So you know that this is the same across the board. So please manage your client better, just in terms of the constant chasing, because it was actually beginning to annoy me and stress me out. And it was taking up just my energy and my thoughts, yeah? And I was just like, this has got to stop. So I said to them, I got to a point where I said, look, from this point onwards, do not contact me anymore about this transaction. First of all, it's not even my job to be giving updates. That's not how a transaction normally works. I've been doing it up until now because I want to be helpful. But, you know, the buyer's really taking the okay? So I'm not answering any more questions or giving any more updates. Go directly to my solicitor, okay? And my solicitor will update the seller's solicitor, and that's how this will get resolved. And that's how this process is going to work its way out from here onwards. I'm not answering anymore, right? And the agent knew that that was perfectly legit, and they was like, oh, you know, they just really want to sell. They're paying 2 mortgages. The seller's boyfriend is calling the office now as well. And I was like, that's not my problem. I don't care. And I was like, furthermore, the seller's boyfriend doesn't even own the property. It was an individual who was a lady. And, you know, she'd moved obviously with her boyfriend to a new property, but for some reason her boyfriend was getting involved, calling the estate agent's office saying it's taking too long, making all these demands. So anyway, after that, a few more weeks rolled on. So we're probably about, I feel about like 2-3 weeks away from, you know, when the transaction actually completed. And then I get an email from the estate agent again. Even though I said, do not contact me anymore, they said, okay, we need to inform you that the seller is giving you a deadline of next week, Wednesday, to complete this, otherwise they are pulling out. I read the email and I was like, okay, they've actually given a deadline. I didn't respond though, as I said, I'm not responding. I called my solicitor and I said, hey look, the estate agent has just sent me this email, deadline next week, Wednesday. Has this been communicated to you via their solicitor? They said, no, it hasn't. So it was basically the seller and or her boyfriend basically trying to pressure me via the estate agent by giving this fake deadline that they hadn't communicated to their solicitor. It was just more pressure tactics, right? So I was just like, oh, I'm so fed up of this. So I basically just ignored it and I said to my solicitor, crack on. And I said, however long it takes. If they want to pull out, that's fine. I can always just buy another property. And in that scenario, I'm fine. I'll buy another property just a bit later than I planned for. They've got to start their whole process again and maybe take another 6 months to sell the property and pay their mortgage for another 6 months. And that was basically the nature of the transaction from about month 2 to month 6, so for 4 months. Long, guys. I mean, long. I've never dealt with a more irritating, stressful person to do business with. So what have I learned, right? First and foremost, guys, and frame this right, whenever you're buying or selling a property, only deal via your solicitor. So if you get any messages from an agent from the beginning, and I'm going to be doing this from now forevermore, I don't have any updates for you. Seller is going to have to go through their solicitor. I'm not giving you it. I'm just going to refuse to do that from now on because I've learned the hard way, guys. It's just not worth it. It's a headache, okay? That being said, guys, it's a good idea to, I don't know a better word to use, but to chase your solicitors every 2-3 weeks just to get updates on where they're at. Because if I'm going to be completely honest, I do think that my solicitor probably could have done it a month or 2 sooner. And there were times where I'd call them and ask for an update and they'd say conveniently, oh yeah, I was just about to do that today. And I was like, you was about to do that today the last time I called you and the last time I called you. So I reckon about a month could have been shaved off of the processing time. So it's a good idea just to keep a steady, light, friendly amount of pressure, gentle pressure on your solicitor, because if you just leave them to it, not all solicitors are created equally and not all solicitors are proactive. So I think that's a good idea, okay, to keep a gentle amount of steady pressure on your solicitor when it comes to property purchases. Thank you for watching. This year I'm making a video every month to answer any questions that you have for me. So whether you want to know whether you should invest in a limited company or in your own name, whether you should buy a flat or a house, what is the best way to get started in property, or who my barber is, just let me know. You can ask me in the comment section below, on Instagram, on TikTok, and I'll make a video dedicated to your questions. Like and subscribe, and thanks for watching.